Welcome to episode number 51 and another installment of Direct Connections. This time around, we have returning guests Chuck and Matt McMurray. You hear me talking about their work nearly every show with HemiPages.com, ReadyChassis.shop, and of course, the BuildMOPAR project. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're about to get up to speed. So without further ado, if you are a Mopar enthusiast, then you are in the right place. Don't go anywhere. You're tuned into the best Mopar enthusiast-driven podcast on planet Earth. And I am your host, Chris Albrecht, better known as the Mopar Hunter, and this is Talking Mopars, Direct Connections.
You're listening to Talking Mopars with the Mopar Hunter, your direct connection to all things Mopar.
Ladies and gentlemen, back again. Chuck for the third time, Matt for the second time. I have the McMurrays, the brains behind the BuildMOPAR project, HemiPages.com, and ReadyChassis.shop. Guys, welcome back to the show. How are you guys doing?
Good. Very good. Thanks for having us, Chris. Appreciate it. Doing well. Thank you for having us.
Oh, definitely. You guys are making some power moves in the world of Mopar, and I'm really excited about your current project, which is the BuildMOPAR project. I've been talking about it as much as I can because I'm so excited about it. But for those that aren't familiar with the BuildMOPAR project, tell us what that's about.
Sure. So earlier this year, especially with all of the political upheaval and everybody being locked in their house and most drag strips being closed, we felt like we really wanted to do something different for the drag racing and Mopar audience, but for the most part, people that like to build and really race Mopars. And so we came up with what we called the V8 vote, or the cooperative car build, which we originally named Democracy on Slicks, but we stuck with BuildMOPAR. But the concept being that consumers, enthusiasts could vote on roughly 10 to 11 different stages of the build of a car that we would campaign in 2021. So the only thing we really had going into it was nominations by the vendors of what they thought, the four cars should be, and what the racing sanctioned bodies should be that we participated in. And from there, it's been enthusiast votes, many times in the hundreds, and we're through I think 6 votes now. So it's getting interesting. We're now getting into the technical aspects of picking drive lines and setting the car up for things that are really going to define how it runs and type of fuel that it uses in that. So it's really interesting. So the way that it's worked is about every 2 or 3 weeks we release a new vote, and we do various marketing events to get the campaign out there, make the poll available, and then people vote. For example, right now we're at the engine build vote, where they're picking the enthusiasts are picking the shop that they want to see build the engine. Previous to that was the the power adder pick, and that the win went to the Whipple supercharger. So we're starting to define some of the more mechanical things, but it's been a really fun project. We're getting a lot of feedback. We actually get a lot of questions emailed to us, and it's just been fun to be able to interact with the audience. And there's some surprises in there too that I never expected. So that's been a lot of fun to see what people really think and what they vote on for each phase of the car.
Awesome. What kind of questions are you getting about the car?
So, even though we've published that we're going to be running it in the Modern Street Hemi Shootout, people have asked us what class that we're planning on running in, what kind of fuel we're planning on running, how big the tires will be, before. It's funny, a lot of the things that they drill into are the questions that are going to get answered when the next votes come up. So they were asking us what engine shop, will we be running a Mopar transmission or not? Will we be running a Dana or an 8 3/4 or not? What's the size of the rear tires? And then, of course, we get free unsolicited advice, which we knew we would get with, what we think what folks think we should be doing.
Sure.
And things like that. So it's been good. It's educating, given that we've got a company that's going to be continuing to build cars far after this campaign is over. And so this is actually serving as kind of a prototype for one of the A bodies we'll be offering as it graduates to the final stages.
Right on. So this is going to be a package that Ready Chassis will be able to provide to people that want to go fast.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
We'll have it in 3 different formats, really. Well, actually 4, I should say. One is we'll be publishing a book, a manual on how to build the exact same car using the same package and some of the things that we faced in the process. You'll be able to build or buy a rolling chassis that is painted and essentially built without driveline. And then you'll be able to get a relatively finished car with driveline and maybe leaving some of the details out, like safety belts and parachutes and things like that, or the completely assembled, turnkey and tested, ready to rock version of this same car. So, and we'll probably offer popular colors as well as the factory swatches that are available.
Awesome. Now, I know that we've talked in the past about Ready Chassis, but once again, for those that don't know or aren't aware of your other little project, your other business, why don't you fill in the listeners about Ready Chassis and what it's all about?
Sure. So years ago, we decided that there's a lot of really cool drivelines that Mopar is bringing to market, and quite frankly, a lot of cool late model drivelines that the other makes are bringing to market as well. And what we really saw was a lack of a good racing chassis that was built off of vintage and modern cars. So think of a rolling chassis drag pack. There doesn't seem to be an option out there for somebody that's got the engine and trans and really wants to get out of either a rust bucket of a race car or something with an old outdated cage. And we felt like offering really nicely restored rastorations. That's what we call them. So they're restored. They're not concours restorations or anything. And we're not cutting up 340 cars, but offering a nice rolling chassis that is essentially ready for multiple engines. So if you take something like a restoration shop and the flexibility of if you know anything about Factory 5 and what they did with the Mustang parts market and the AC Cobra, that's what we really want to bring to market for Mopar. And then as it expands, we'll probably offer something for Mustang, just because we know the audience is so large and that we'd want to be able to capture it. But we're Mopar guys at heart, so we'll be there. We'll start there and continue there for quite some time. And I've probably built 30 or 40 cars in the last 30 years. I've bought and sold, so I'm not new to it whatsoever. And what we're working to do now is bring a lot of things in-house so that we can offer a very competitive price, because I don't want it to be a $90,000 chassis. I'd really like to get the $40,000 to $60,000 range out there for guys that want to have a pretty serious race car that's practically turnkey, if not turnkey, depending on their options, and make it affordable, because I think quantity counts, and I think that's what'll keep drag racing, the grassroots part of it, around for a long time.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And especially, I've actually become a little bit obsessed lately with all these street racing videos that I've been seeing on YouTube. And not just, you see the street outlaws and whatnot on TV, but I'm talking about the real, like that grassroots, like, cash days and things like that are going on, off the TV, but on YouTube. And there's some pretty interesting cars. But one thing that I always wish I saw more of was Mopars. So it'll be interesting to see, with a resource like Ready Chassis, if more people, get into Mopar chassis, which would be really nice. There is one Mopar. I'm not sure if you guys are aware or have heard, but Project Tetanus. Have you guys heard about that one?
Yeah.
The Roadrunner?
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is really cool to me. And I think it would be awesome to see more Mopars out there, because you always see the Fox bodies. The Fox bodies are just, they're dominating out there on the streets. And,
Sure.
old Mopars, they're heavy, but I think that with the right build, the right chassis, I think that they can be quite competitive, especially when you take into account the third generation Hemi and all the developments that have been happening over the past few years with that platform. I think it's going to be really big for street racing, and obviously can't condone street racing, but stay safe and go to the track. I'm really excited about that. But let's get back to Build Mopar now that we know about Ready Chassis and what you guys will provide with that. The Build Mopar Dart, called the Dart Pack. Now, the Hemi that you guys are putting in, so the idea is basically a super stock tribute car. It's a 68 Dodge Dart that has one interesting feature, and that's the modern Hemi swap versus the second generation Hemi. So tell us what engine you guys are going to base this build on.
Sure. So it's going to be a 426 cubic inch based BEG or BGE block, which is the big gas block that Mopar offers. You can go down to a dealership and buy a replacement block now. So it'll be a 426 cube stroker version of that block. The vote that is open right now, that'll close on the 24th at midnight, is for the 6 shops that we have given, as nominations, as choices to the voters. And so right now, Arrington has 81 votes, and they are leading the pack. Hughes Engines is second. MMX is third. BES Racing is fourth. Opel Engineering, who was a favorite of mine, and I had to throw in there because he built my last engine, is fifth. And Prestige Motorsports is sixth. And so the way that we actually created the nomination is I did a small 200-person vote. I put up about 10 shops, and with the exception of Opel, those were the shops that came up. And so I threw Ted's business in there just to make it interesting. A lot of people don't know Opel Engineering actually built a lot of the super stock and pro stock engines. Actually, he was part of, I believe, Glidden and a lot of the other ones in the 90s. And so he had a lot of innate knowledge of the Hemi 99 program as well as the pro stock program. And so I felt like he'd be a really good contender. Great guy, also local to us. Hughes Engines isn't too far from us either. BES Engines is Indianapolis, kind of a drive. Arrington's probably the furthest, being in Michigan. But I actually have met and have talked to Mike Copeland many times and really like some of the things that he's offered. And he's actually got a crate engine. The only shop that I've actually not, the 2 shops I've not worked with was MMX and Prestige Motorsports, although with Hemi Page's Prestige Motorsports reached out to us and had a number of conversations, so they're not unfamiliar with us. But the engine will have Thytec heads. It'll have from what I've gathered from the shop's recommendations, a ProFlow EFI. And then I've also talked to Troy Aves, who is a person who was very generous with his information and gave me a lot of, tribal knowledge around what he learned from building that crazy yellow dart that he's racing. And really got a lot of information around ethanol and what he's done in his dual fuel system and some other things that actually make this a street-worthy car, but a killer car at the track. And if you've kept up with some of the times and things that he's run, he's just got an incredible platform. So I've got a lot more information around, that build. And everybody's been really helpful. I mean, Whipple, in reaching out to them, they were incredibly responsive. Gave us a couple of different head unit options. And of course, right as we got the Whipple vote completed, the Mopar drag pack was announced with the 3-liter Whipple. And then just recently I saw that Jeff Turk was doing some testing and squeezed 1,700 plus horsepower out of a identical 2020 drag pack aluminum engine, which was pretty insane, that I think he ran at Moparty this last weekend. So I don't know how easy it would be to get that 3-liter on in our hands, but I think Whipple's willing to work with us. So it'll be very exciting. I think we'll have a cutting edge engine. I think the biggest difference between us and what Turk is running is we'll have the iron block. but that's really recommended for durability. And we've got a number of races we have to compete with next year, and we don't need to make 1,700 horse. So we're shooting for 850s, not sub 750
Yeah.
time slips. So
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, you have some serious names involved in that vote. I'm really impressed. Um, as far as the heads that you were talking, you reached out to Whipple and Whipple's technical department. They got back to you. What did they say about the 6.4 based modern Hemis?
So when I reached out to Nick Pacello at Whipple Superchargers just with a couple of questions back when we were doing the vote because we saw that they were in the lead. And so we basically just openly went to them, said, what head unit would you recommend? And when they got back to us, they recommended the Edelbach Performer heads, which are kind of like a standard condition. They're very universal. And a lot of guys will end up using those because, one, they don't want to damage the heads that they get from the factory because, if they port and polish those and then they have to use them to go back to do, emissions and they don't pass, that might be a problem. So these guys get them because they're kind of a cheap alternative instead of buying Thytex or, you know, there's a couple other companies, but they recommended that, and then they also recommended if we wanted to use the stock heads that came with the 6.4 block, they recommended this place I had never heard of before called Frankenstein Engine Dynamics, and they had a porting service there that was about the same price as actually buying the Edelbrock Performer heads new, but they were willing to work with a lot of the aerodynamics of the port work and kind of working with your custom build versus kind of just giving you generic numbers based on what they've done in the past. So they were very open to taking the numbers that we were willing to give them. And you can actually check out their site. They do list that they're basically open to suggestions. So if you say that you're going to be using a Whipple supercharger, they'll do the research to help you to figure out what exactly you need to make the most out of what you have.
Very cool. Yeah, I keep hearing about the third generation Hemi and how great the heads flow. Even with that the first generation of the third generation Hemi, if that makes sense, like the really early ones. I hear that they, as the years progress, they just keep getting better and better, and we see that with the horsepower numbers and the quarter mile numbers. I'm really curious, where do you guys see the power for the Dart Pack? Where do you think that's going to end up being at?
So my target is probably a peak of 1,400 before 7,600 RPM, which is pretty incredible. I mean, if you think of the numbers. But given that we'd be running ethanol, given that we can deal with pretty wild camshaft profiles, and that we'll have an extensive amount of head work done, and we can get away with, pretty crazy compression, we have that flexibility. Because street worthiness is really a secondary factor. We're willing to deal with what it takes to make it street worthy for the purposes of being able to take it to shows, but it's a track-based car. So like Troy Aves, we'll be running, a 16-gallon E85 E98 tank, mixed at the pump for street use. And then we'll be running Ignite, 112, 114 for the track. And so that'll require a ball valve bypass and a 3-gallon additional fuel cell for the track. But, so the complexity of it allows us to be able to get away with those things. A lot of guys don't care about that, but we really want this car to be kind of an icon for if you're going to build a killer dart. And even like you said, for the people that are out there to do these no prep events or these X275 events, we really want to build something that's going to be a fantastic example for what they can copy. But to Matthew's point, one thing that we're factoring in the build is a budget, right? And so Thytech heads, Whipple supercharger, BGE block, rotating assembly by Arrington, but we also have to figure out how to make the budget fit for the whole car, because if you remember, my target for the build was to give a person who may have an A body a $45,000 budget to make an 850 car that is streetable. The budget right now I've got worked out to be about $60,000, but that's because there's paint labor, I've got some muddy and metal work, a fiberglass front end. There's ways to be able to cut corners to get items used, to be able to find some savings. That's also allotting $12,000 for the rolling shell and glass. So we're also, I guess, I say that to say that we're trying to also figure out what the budgeting aspect of this will be, so that when we actually do the build, we're being cognizant of not just picking the best parts that most people wouldn't be able to fix or pick. And if we can get away with using a cheaper cylinder head, we may consider that based on what the final budget numbers are from the build that the shop recommends.
Yeah, when you talk about, your projections of 1,400 horsepower, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, okay, third generation Hemi, Whipple supercharger, well over 1,000 horsepower. I'm thinking to myself, well, that competes right with the engine that everybody, coveted the most in the past year, and that was the Elephant.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're telling me is that, I don't necessarily have to wait for Mopar to get stocked up on those Elephants. I can essentially copy this Build Mopar project, copy the engine plan, and have more power.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The difference being that, Mopar puts a warranty right on their engines. Ours is going to come with a multi-thread warranty. Whipple has their own. The engine shop would probably have a 12,000-mile warranty. If I'm not mistaken, the Elephant has a 336 on it. So they've actually, I'm sure the Elephant is capable under different fuel calculations and boost to be able to make the same numbers. The IHI blower, from what I understand, is large enough to do it, but it's a down-tuned version so that it'll live, because they know that people are going to go out there as, crate motor buyers and drop them in a car and flog them to death, and they want them to live. But I definitely think with fuel changes and the correct fuel tables and the right DA, that they're all capable of probably the same. But ours is going to be a proven package, a dyno package, down to the part number, down to the dollars and cents of balancing the crankshaft. So people will be able to duplicate it. They'll be able to go to the same shops and do the same thing we did.
Awesome. Now, I know that I speak for some of the crazy guys out there. I know there's some Mopar guys listening to this and they're going, okay, I'm just going to copy the engine. I'm going to drop it in my old Duster. How much for if somebody just wanted to copy the exact engine, forget the transmission, forget all the stuff that you obviously are going to need. But for those crazy people out there that just want to know, how much is that engine going to cost? Because right now they're thinking, okay, 1,000 horsepower supercharged Hemi or the Elephant. This one's going to have a little bit more power, may not be as streetable. Obviously, more complicated warranty. Where are you guys at as far as money on the engine itself?
So the engine subgroup that we've put together in the published online budget, it is the Arrington 426 long block, which is about a $12,000 package. A fuel system that's fuel cell to the front of the car, which is about $1,200. Where the tricky stuff gets is what type of intake and what type of customization you want for the head unit and the head. So I'm going down the route of Holley Terminator EFI and Hyper Spark Ignition, or ProFlow EFI. So I've looked at sort of both of those. And then, of course, the head unit is the big money, is the money difference, right? If you get into a race kit with Whipple that doesn't require a fuel system, it's not built for a Hellcat. It's actually a head unit and pulleys. You're in the few thousands range. But if you want to buy a non-tuner kit, if you want to buy a Hellcat kit and start there, you're looking at something like $8,500. So what I would say is a safe bet is probably, supercharger to pan with headers. You're probably looking somewhere between 18 and 20,000. It can be done for less, because there are parts that you can pull together. I mean, you can go out and get a BGE block that's seasoned out of a truck. You can use different cylinder heads that flow the same numbers. You can find a used Hellcat intake and just get the Whipple head unit. There's a lot of ways to cut, but if you're going to buy brand new, you're probably looking at that amount. And that actually does represent, short of the body and the car itself and the paint that you'll put into it, it's the largest investment. Which is why with Ready Chassis, we want to offer rolling chassis, because I figure that there's going to be a lot of guys out there that have Hellcat red eyes, and they want to maybe put their car back on the street and enjoy it, and they've got this crazy driveline that they'd put in something else. And what a better place to put it in than a vintage, fully aftermarket car that's a tribute to the Hearst Dart. They could be made out of a 68, 67 to 69 chassis with an emblem change and the right seats. I mean, almost anybody can build one. All of the parts are out there. So, but that's my answer. I'd say, it's south of 20,000, but you're also talking about a very stout, powerful engine that'll probably be the last engine you'll need to buy for quite a few years, because the aftermarket's only gonna get better for the parts that are out there.
Definitely. It's funny that you mentioned that, because that was my next question I was going to lead into. Okay, we've got the supercharged Hemi. We got 4-digit horsepower. We're actually, so far, based on what you're telling me, we're actually cheaper than the Elephant. This sounds like a bargain. How reliable, more importantly, how durable is this combination going to be?
So it's interesting with the BGE block and a lot of the, if you go with something like a Molnar crank, H-beam rods, and a really solid piston set with some gas porting, I mean, you can get away with a lot. These engines, the alloy that the cylinder heads are built with, the airflow design, like you had mentioned, in the heads, in this particular engine that we're going to offer, we're going to do 16 smart coils, so you'll have the ability to really tune ignition curves. Not that they would be all that different from engine to engine, but depending on exhaust system and frame, the length of the header tubes and things like that, there is some variables. But I think it'll be indestructible so long as people don't get crazy with fogger nitrous kits, or if they don't do really good jobs of checking their ethanol rates. I mean, if they go, technically this can be an E85 engine. It's just that the pump E85 can have such a variability that you can get detonation if you're running crap fuel, and that's when you start breaking parts. So that's why the plan for us is to race on the Ignite ethanol. But for street driving, we can throw in a mild tune, turn the engine back to 600 horsepower, and drive it on the street with no problem at all, and it'll still be pretty wild.
Yeah, that's really exciting, because that much power on tap, turning it down to be able to drive it on the street, so it's still, reasonable, so you could still, go get some milk at the grocery store or whatever, and then on Saturday night go have a good time. That's one thing that I've been noticing. And for me, I'm not a scientist. It seems to me like to get involved and really serious about drag racing these days, you have to get really technical. It's not like the old days where, it was so grassroots. You got grassroots guys that are just throwing turbos and nitrous on things and running unbelievable times. So it's really interesting to me to see where the third generation Hemi platform is going and how quickly it seems like it's advancing. Maybe I just haven't been into the third generation Hemis that long, but it seems to me like the more time that passes, the closer we get to having that same respect as the LS platform, which is what I want to see. I'm waiting for the day that finally the Hemis are cheap enough where everybody wants to Hemi swap everything. That would be nice. Are you guys seeing the same thing as far as the third generation Hemis?
Yeah, it's really a matter of time. If you think about the things that Mopar has done, since the beginning, right? And then even in the 90s, they went back to Tom Hoover and they said, if you're going to build this engine, if you're going to build a hemispherical head design, again, how would you do it so that it lasts and so that it's not a rare piece like the original 426 was? Because you got to remember the 426 Hemi was a replacement for the wedge.
Yeah.
and it was originally a NASCAR design motor. Actually wasn't intended for drag until Garlitz gave it the JJ twist or whatever it was when he got threatened and threw 50 degrees of timing in
Yeah.
it and got an 8-second pass out of it. I forget what it was that he called it, but you know, I think they threw a lot more engineering into it, and it's obvious to me that with things like the Elephant, with the advent of the super stock, we saw it with the Demon. You know, they've built these things to be, for lack of a better word, beat to hell in the desert, in cold weather, with pump gas, and that's a pretty broad range of discipline that they've built it for. So if they're willing to warranty a car that's out of the box 804 horse that runs on 93, that almost any idiot and any expert can get their hands on, you know, that's a pretty amazing thing that they've done. And I think that, as you said, I think as they become more available in quantity, I really think that the LS market is going to get shadowed by the availability. I think the toughest part, and it's funny, I had this conversation with Troy Aves. I actually said, so what's the one downside that you see to the Hemi market? And he said it's the amount of changes that came from year to year in the way that the VVT and the cam profiles, the different cylinder heads, which were adaptations to make the cars better on the street, better vehicles. He said it's more homework for the person who wants to get started. However, he said the aftermarket is getting much better at offering parts that support that, so that's going to become a non-issue. And I think when that becomes a non-issue, I think the LS market has a challenge. I think they'll always have quantity. Chevy always has quantity. But I think the Hemi everything is going to be a movement that will be a lot of fun, and we'll see Hellcat engines and Elephant engines and aftermarket, you know, combobulations in some of the craziest things. I mean, we saw it in a Grand National recently. You know, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I'm going to start throwing out challenges to people just based on the fact that I don't have the money, but there's a lot of cars and trucks that I would love to see modern Hemis in. One of them, one of my favorite, this is going to piss a lot of Mopar people off, one of my favorite vehicles of all time, just because of what it was, I should say, were the Cyclone and Typhoon, the GMCs. I always thought they were awesome. Just the whole, you know, all-wheel drive turbocharged V6,
Sure.
I thought was really cool with the 700 R4. You know, it just ahead of their time, if you ask me. You know, following right on the tail end of that Grand National and the Buick T-types. I would love to see someone just bastardize a Cyclone or Typhoon and put a supercharged Hemi in it. So that's a challenge to anybody out there listening. I'm sure, I mean, I've always heard if you can think of it, somebody's already done it. So maybe somebody's out there right now, Hemi swapping a Cyclone or a Typhoon. That would be pretty cool. But
Yeah.
I really, if you ask me, I think a lot of it is the money. Every time I look at Hemis, it seems like they're more expensive than LSs. But, you know, I talked to Blake Anderman from DIY Hemi, and he's telling me that you can get just a block for a few grand. So it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to, you know, I look at companies like Cleveland Power and Performance, where they have like the crate engines and the takeouts from rebuildables or salvage vehicles, I mean.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I could go that direction, you know, if I want to, you know, keep things a little tame, you know, and just drop in a stock, maybe throw some bolt-ons in. But if I want to go for a full build, I could just go buy a block and just start with the block. Because, you know, with the 6.4s, I always hear that the first thing you want to do for a boost application is you want to get, you want to upgrade the rotating assembly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, forged pistons.
Yeah, forged. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Brain fart. But it's definitely interesting. I can never say it enough how excited I am to see the whole Hemi movement develop, because, you know, it seems like every time I open Facebook, there's somebody out there doing something crazy. Like we were just talking about the 1700 or the 1400 the 1700 horsepower. That was just insane to me. And thinking about that, it's like, okay, where is the limit on these things? And that's what I'm really excited about the Build Mopar project is, you know, that was my question, was what is the limit? You know, and I like that we're staying true and keeping it at 426. I think that's awesome. Now, why not bigger than 426? I'm sure there's a lot of people out there going, why did they stop at 426?
Sure. Well, because the power adder is and the ethanol combination is such an efficient and capable system that the cubic inches really aren't required. The other thing is although the block, the lower, the main caps, the block design was really made to hold an incredible amount of power. It's very rigid. It's nothing, even like the 426 Hemi, the Gen 2. It's a complete generational upgrade. The hardest part is keeping it livable. And when you get north of 400 and, oddly enough, 440 cubic inches, you start getting into crank throw, rod ratio differences that just don't have an advantage. And in fact, with the right, ethanol, with the right fuel mix, cubic inches actually start to essentially hurt fuel tables and some other things. The actual forecast that we were given from an optimal cubic inch was around 410 cubic inches.
Really?
But I wanted to keep the 26, not only because the piston choice is cheaper, but it's just, part of that legacy. I think it makes the car a lot more popular, and it's kind of a throwback to what the original car was made with. People will know that it's the same cubic inches, but it's really the technology that's making the difference with such crazy numbers. Although the Gen 2s were not shy by any means. They were pretty wicked, especially given that they were running through 2 AFB carburetors and a dual plane. And it's just incredible what they were able to do then, but we've really got it beat now.
And that's, that just speaks to the legend of the elephant. I was thinking about that the other day. I'm like, gosh, they didn't have Whipple back then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just insane to think what they were doing with those cars. And, I need to dig into a little bit more research, because as the BuildMOPAR project started to develop, and to be honest with you, from the get-go, as soon as you announced what cars they were going to be, for some reason I was like, oh, it's got to be a Dart. I know it's going to be a Dart. I just had this feeling. And early on in the podcast, I said one of my dreams would be to see a super stock Dart with a modern drivetrain in it. So this is like, a wet dream for me. I'm excited about this. So going back to the old school stuff, who would have thought that years later, you could probably still, I would like to see you guys put that car, as like an exhibition. I would love to see the BuildMOPAR Dart versus, an old super stock Dart. That would be,
Sure.
That would be really fun.
Sure.
Now, you guys are going to debut this car next year at the Modern Street Hemi Shootout. Do we have a date yet for that? Do you have a projected date?
So the first race, according to what I know of what Dan Van Horn has published, the first race is at No Problem Raceway in the March timeframe. So we will be testing and tuning probably weeks before that first race. So I would say that first race is going to be, I wouldn't say it's going to be our shakedown passes, but it's going to be the first debut of a dialed in tune. And some of the fit and finish work, depending on how things go this winter, might even be entering in. But chassis work, engine build, transmission stuff, all of that I can get arranged really quickly in the January timeframe. I've already given heads up to a lot of shops. The stuff that we've picked, because we're using a stock floorboard, although the suspension choice will be an open, vote, I think people will probably either pick a 4-link or a ladder bar. I don't think anyone will be nuts enough to go for a leaf spring or a cal track, but there'll be options because, I've been surprised already. I didn't think that the turbo, to be honest, I didn't think it was going to lose. And to see it come in, much further down the line. The Kenny Bell was much further down the line. The nitrous option didn't even make 10 votes. I mean, I've been surprised so far, so I guess I probably won't be surprised when it comes to the other options. But we'll make it work. And the first debut, we'll probably have some test passes down in Atlanta in February. We'll have to go south to get those down. Maybe even Rockingham. We'll make the drive and get the shakedowns done, unless, of course, the weather's great in Chicago and Great Lakes gives us a private day. But that'll be when it's out. But to go back one step, I wanted to tell you one of the options we had thought about after Dart Pack is finished is we wanted to come up with a concept called Hemi Anything, where we were going to take a 5.7 out of a Charger and bolt it onto things like lawnmowers, generators, wood choppers. I mean, if we can bolt the bell housing to something, we figured, why don't we put a Hemi in it? And then, of course, insane cars like a front-wheel drive Eldorado, a rear-wheel drive Mazda. I mean, whatever we could get our hands on. We figured it'd be a fun YouTube series. And I'm sure someone will steal my idea, but of course they have to have the knowledge and the know-how to do it. But we thought about that as a kind of a fun thing. A chainsaw with a 5.7 Hemi. I mean, that would be dangerous, but it would be fun.
You're insane, Chuck, but that's why I like you. And hey, people can try to steal it, but it was said here on Talking Mopars, so that's just as good as a trademark or a patent or a copyright, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
No, that's awesome, and I want to see everything under the sun get Hemi swapped, because I mean, everybody's putting LSs in everything. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So it's only fair that the Hemi gets some love, and I think that, and I'm going to say this until this podcast is gone and done, and that's that it will always be cooler to say that you have a Hemi over an LS. I will argue that to anybody on this planet. It's always cooler to say you have a Hemi.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. You guys are going to be ready for that Modern Street Hemi shootout. So you're going to be in the 850 class. I want to hear some predictions. What do you guys think the first runs are going to be?
From my experience, we'll probably shake down at 10s.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to make a 999 pass to get my NHRA license. So we'll have to make 3 licensed passes under the watch of the NHRA. So we'll probably have to go down to Indy, unless, of course, 66 is open, which is why I was saying maybe we'll have to do Rockingham, but we'll have to make our license passes for me to get my license. And then as we get to tune in, I think we'll probably get in the high 8s. But with the power level we've got, it'll be, I personally think it'll be easy to break out. I mean, the index is 850, but I think we can get to 820s, 80s without a problem. I think it'll be us dealing with the weather and having the flexibility to pull power out of the car to get to the 850. But it's funny, we were at the track, we've gone, I think 6 times in the last 6 weeks. No, not 6 weeks, last 2 months. And I'm watching some of these Hellcats, and I'm watching some of these cars. In fact, we saw a Supra do a 7.0 or a 6.9 at 208. And we were standing right next to the starting line, and I'm watching these cars, and I'm going, man, that's fast. I mean, I've gone 880s in a dragster. I did Frank Hawley's drag racing school as my my 18th birthday gift. I begged my parents to let me
awesome
to go down and do that. But I've been in 8 and 9 second cars in my life, and it's in a full-bodied car. It's a different experience, but it's fast. I mean, no bones about it. Making mistakes can get pretty wild at the top end. So
so boys and girls, you can't just jump in an 8-second car, think you're going to go racing at the track. You might get one pass in, and then you're going to get booted. You definitely need an NHRA license. There's a lot of people, myself included, that don't know that entire process. So for somebody that doesn't know about getting licensed to race NHRA, tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So the NHRA has a rule where they will license you that you have to make 3 passes in the time zone that you plan on racing. So if you need if you're going to run 950, for example, you need an NHRA license. So what they'll do is they'll have you show up. You actually let the tower know that you're there for licensing passes. They actually give you if you ever see a car with LIC written on it, that's a person who's making license passes. And what they're looking for is to make sure that, you abide by the rules, that you act safely, and that you make 3 complete full motor passes under the watchful eyes of the NHRA tech in the zone that you're trying to run. So if you want to go 990 or faster, 999 or faster, you have to have an NHRA license. And that's kind of how it works. I don't know if you have to pay for it. I do think there's like a $60 fee, and I do know that you have to be an NHRA member, so you get like National Dragster or whatever. I think that's like a $60 or $50 or $60 membership per year, so you have to at least have that. But it's a process, but it's actually pretty easy. They just want to see you do it 3 times under the clocks, and that you don't run anybody over, and that you don't exceed speed limits in the pits. And then once you've got it, I think it's good for 3 or 5 years. It's kind of like seatbelts. You have to renew it, but they just want to make sure that if you're going that fast, that you know what you're doing.
That's cool. Matt, you better get your NHRA license, because guess what? I'm going to get mine, so that if Chuck calls in sick the day that car is supposed to go down the track, Chris has his license.
Got 2 backups.
There you go.
That's really cool, man. I always wondered about that, because I've never been in anything fast. So I've always wondered, what does it take to get into something fast? If you had something fast or access to something fast, I imagined that you couldn't just jump in and go for it, because I've seen even at like the high school drags back when I was a kid, watching these kids try to figure out what to do. It seems like a lot of people think you just go and you just line up, and when the light is green, you go. So it's really funny to see real amateurs that really don't have any idea what they're doing go down the track. So I'm glad that there's some structure, because I still freak out when I think about the amount of power that some of these cars from dealerships, from showroom floors have, that anybody can go and buy. It just boggles my mind that somebody can go buy a supercharged, even just a Hellcat, with no experience driving something powerful. That's a very scary thought to me.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Matt, let's bring you in for a little bit. I want to know what you think the car is going to do. Where do you see the project going? What do you want to see the project end up being? I'm really curious what you have to say about it.
So right around the time that I started doing some research about the headwork, I did a little bit of basic math to basically figure out, if the car was at a similar weight to Troyev's car, so if it ended up anywhere between, 2,800, 2,700 pounds, how much horsepower do we need to get into that range of 850s? And it turned out that when I did the math, despite density, altitude, despite the weather, despite, the surface you're racing on, we really only should need somewhere around the 1,200 horsepower range. And so that's the information that I got from doing some basic math, but obviously there's a lot of other factors, as I've said. And so I think that going for the extra horsepower range, such as 1,400, would make up for the difference in case, 1,200 just isn't enough in some conditions. And so I think it would be more, I guess the best term for it is, it would be more epic for us to break out and go faster than the 850 index than to end up running, not even up to our goal. Because I think that a lot of people who are watching us do this project so far are saying, these guys are going to do it, and th're crazy enough to be the first people, the pioneers ahead of us. We'll kind of follow in their footsteps, and if they're going to continue to do this with other cars, they'll be able to basically say, okay, this is what they did wrong, this is what they did right, let's follow the right footsteps, and then maybe eventually we can get this figured out, kind of the same way the LS guys do. And so, I think, again, it's going to depend a lot on what people choose as far as tires are concerned, as far as traction is concerned. We do have to follow certain safety certifications and requirements, because that's just what the NHRA has you do. So, we can't cut a roll bar out of the car. That absolutely has to be a part of our operation.
Yeah.
So, we can't go commando and just run with a ratchet strap for a seatbelt.
Go commando, so, I like that. That's funny.
So we'll kind of see where it goes. I think that going higher horsepower, higher torque numbers will make up for the difference, regardless of, we run on a hot day, we run on a cold day, or we can't get traction or we can. So yeah, I think that's going to be pretty easy to do as far as just going for the biggest number possible, but not something that's going to be totally ridiculous at the same time.
Awesome. Yeah, a lot of people, for a long time, I didn't realize how scientific racing really could get. When you talk about DA and just the calculations, when I was doing research on the Ram Chargers, it was interesting to me to find out that there was one of those brainiacs sitting there making all these calculations, and he was predicting how fast the cars were going to go, based on their combinations and stuff. So, and you see
Yeah.
that even on TV, or if you go to the racetrack and you watch the professionals, there's always a laptop, involved. So it's super technical, and it really makes things interesting. I'm really excited to see, how easily you guys can get 4-digit horsepower to hook up, depending on, how these votes turn out, and what kind of car ends up getting built. So that leads me into the question. I'm going to start with you, Matt. If you had your idea, like if the votes went your way, how would you see this car being completed?
It's actually pretty funny, but the way that everything has gone so far, I didn't have a lot of secondary options other than maybe seeing the car get built with a turbo. Um, I guess that would be kind of cool just to see because all these cars come from the factory supercharged, or at least there's a factory option with a supercharger, but there is no turbo application. But when it comes to the racing application, you see a lot of guys running turbos, and so it's going to be interesting trying to find that median because while the drag packs are in fact equipped with this Whipple supercharger, and that's kind of what we're going to hope to try and get our hands on, or at least the smaller version, which is the 2.9 liter versus the 3.0. Yeah, I think that seeing people running turbos versus a supercharger would be cool to at the same time build a turbo car because we also have seen Troy Aves do that, and he's proven that it works. So I mean, otherwise, again, with Opel Engineering, we were talking about him earlier, and I think it would be cool to support his business because he's a little bit more local, and we have done a lot of work with him, and he's been very helpful, not only in building the engines, but giving us guidance towards things. And even when I showed up to his shop to learn about dyno stuff, he was very accepting of me not knowing a whole lot and wanting to teach me and my brother a lot of stuff about it because we're pretty young and we don't totally get that exposure. I get a lot of exposure from my dad at home, but for the most part, I don't really get that exposure of being at a shop and stuff like that. So, a lot of the stuff I do is pretty, grassroots, a lot like the drag racing that we're trying to do here. So, yeah, I think that seeing Opel Engineering end up in that first place would be cool, even though it seems at this point it would be a little unrealistic.
Yeah, you need 70-something votes to make up the difference.
All right, everybody listening to this podcast, I am telling you right now, stop listening if you're not going to vote on the Build Mopar. I don't know how you can't not want to take part in this. It's so cool. It's the first of its kind. And, I don't know how you wouldn't be interested to see how this project turns out and ends up. I'm really surprised that the turbo didn't win too. I was actually the crazy guy who's like, I'm voting for the Pro Charger just because I don't know why I was just on a little Pro Charger kick there for a minute. But to be honest with you, after the power adder was chosen, I completely accepted it, and I thought it was very, very cool. I thought it was awesome, and I think it's going to be perfect for this first Build Mopar project, because let's hope that this is the first of many to come. Chuck, ideally, if there were no votes, and from this point forward you had your choice, how would you like to see Dart Pack set up?
So, I mean, my selection, my choices would really be, if I could get a Mopar transmission in it, I'd love that. But I think the Turbo 400 is going to win. I think a ladder bar or 4-link, I think that's going to be the choice that we'll need to make. I think a smaller tire because we're running a smaller wheel tub. Would make the expenses a lot less. But if somebody wants to see a big fat tire under this car, then that's what the populace wants. And I think the wheel choices will be interesting too. But I mean, I've got my favorites, but to be honest, I love all race cars, and I'm just excited to see it come together. And I'm excited to start, providing wearables, T-shirts, stickers, a lot of other things that I think we can do to raise money and support the program.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm sure everybody's just dying to know what I think the car should be. Um, I, I'm special needs. I think it needs to be leaf springs, small tire. I said that when I fantasized about a super stock dart with a modern power plant, that I would literally take a super stock dart and then throw a modern Hemi in it and just see what kind of chaos could erupt from that combination. So that's what I'm riding with. And for everybody listening, you just really have to, if you don't know about the Mopar project, the Build Mopar project, excuse me, go to buildmopar.com and just read up about it, about how far it's come so far. It's so cool. It's the only project like it out there, where you can take part in helping Hemi Pages and Ready Chassis build this car, along with some of the best engine builders in the game. Who knows who's going to get chosen. I hope that I'm going to release this podcast earlier than Monday. I'm going to try to get it out before the vote ends. So hopefully we can get some more numbers there. I would like to know so Modern Street Hemi Shootout, that's where this car is basically going to make its maiden voyage as far as competition. How far into the future do you see yourselves competing with the Dart Pack?
Well, that'll be interesting. It'll be interesting because, I wonder how competitive it will be. It'll be the car, but it'll also be us. If it's a real winner, I think we'll have to make the decision on, do we want to sell it and give somebody else the joy of owning it and build another, maybe based on a different chassis like a Duster? Or do we continue to campaign it for our own purposes and build another? But of course, that would be pretty expensive to continue to maintain, 2 or 3 cars. So I think it'll be more of a decision as to what the public, thinks. I actually had a crazy idea of starting an S corporation and putting the title of the car in the S corp and allowing people to buy essentially stock in the car. So if they bought $10 worth of stock, but they did their own version of marketing the car, they could drive the value of the stock up. So every person that owns a share in stock, if they do their own version of promoting the car, they would increase essentially the value of the car and the company that owns it, because I could put it in a separate S corporation, and then people could actually be shareholders in the vehicle itself. We had toyed around with doing something like that. So, I've got a couple of ideas up my sleeve, but I think we're gonna flog it pretty good in 2021 and decide at the end of the season if maybe we want to do an auction after something like SEMA, or carry on and continue to campaign it with different drivelines. But we'll certainly be making more of them, and I think once the instruction manuals and the parts kits get out there and we start to work with and find out where the weak links are, that'll only make the program even better. So we're pretty excited about it.
Yeah, I keep thinking about Ready Chassis and how cool that idea is. And Matt, real quick, it must be really interesting being Chuck's son, because I imagine he's coming up with all these crazy ideas all the time, and you're just like, okay, Dad. My dad plays it safe. My dad never would say anything cool like that. You know what I mean?
It's so funny because that is one of the most relatable statements I've ever heard about my own dad. It's like the fact that it's really cool because he comes to me with some of half the ideas. You're like, where did you even get this from? And but they're, like you said, he's insane, but he's genius, because a lot of the things that he says, you're like, how could that work? And then when he explains it to you, you're like, oh my God, that's, how come nobody's ever thought of doing something like that? And it's probably just because of his complex way of thinking. But yeah, it's really cool because, it'll there's some Monday mornings where I'm sitting down eating breakfast. And he's like, "What if we did this?" And I'm like, I feel like I'm doing rocket science with him half the time without having the knowledge of being a rocket scientist. But
Man,
They say crazy and genius is only a hair away from each other, so he's dealing with a crazy person.
yeah, I'll say you know, in all seriousness, Chuck is just a serial entrepreneur. And if you know anyone like that, you can't shut it off. You're always having
That's true.
the difference between me and Chuck is I'm afraid of what people will say about my crazy ideas. So it's good for me to have a friend like Chuck who says all these crazy ideas, and I'm like, that sounds amazing. Yes, do it, Chuck. Whatever you need, buddy. No, that's I'm super jealous of you, Matt, because if my dad, because I'm number one cheerleader, I would, yes, Dad, yes, let's do it. So that's awesome. I think it's really cool that you guys as father and son are kind of spearheading this whole thing. That's just so cool to me, and a testament to you know the future generations of not just Mopars but just gearheads in general. um not to get political, but I get scared every time we start talking about climate change and stuff and politics, because I'm like, please don't take gasoline powered engines from us, please. you know um but future generations, man. Matt, you now are a freelance writer, correct? Matt, can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you
You
now.
broke up a little
Oh,
bit.
Matt, you're a freelance writer now, correct?
Yes.
I know that there's some people out there that maybe do a little freelancing of their own. Maybe there's some young people listening to the show right now that would love to get into writing in, automotive journalism. How did you go about doing that, and what has your experience been like so far?
So it's really funny. I went on a Power Auto Media site, if you're familiar with them. They own quite a few different magazine titles, and I was just kind of perusing through what they had to offer. I went into the tabs on the top of the page and found this tab that says "Write for Us," and I've been kind of pursuing writing for, Hemi pages, for example. I've been doing quite a few articles. And when I saw that and it was an opportunity to kind of have a contract versus employment, I was like, you know what, this works good because I'm going to be going into college and I'm going to want to be able to work something out with my schedule. And so I just decided to take it on. And it's actually been, for anybody who is aspiring to do something like this, I'd say it's a very good experience because it allows you to work with a flexible schedule if you're a busy person. The editors are all very supportive, at least for Power Auto Media. Um, and that is usually the case with a lot of people because this is what they do for a job, and so they try to provide the best feedback they can. But yeah, I definitely would say that for anybody who is trying to start their writing career or maybe just spread out what they do a little bit as far as writing concerns, yeah, definitely just go for it. If you want to try and reach out to places like Hot Rod Magazine, which is what I did, I haven't heard anything back, but because I've written some stuff, I'm hoping that the publications can kind of further me into the working world and get me kind of a career in writing and journalism, because that's what I'm trying to major in college in anyways. So
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to ask you if that was one of your aspirations, or if that was just something you were dabbling in. That's very cool. And truth be told, I don't tell too many people this, but some people that have paid attention to my work as the Mopar hunter would know that for a split second in time, a very small second in time, I wanted to be an automotive journalist. And that was a dream that I had ever since I was a kid reading car magazines. But when I started the Mopar Hunter, I got the domain, themoparhunter.com, and I was like, I'm going to start a blog, and I'm going to use that as basically my portfolio that I can shop to, magazines like Hot Rod, et cetera, et cetera. But I quickly realized that I'm not the best writer, even though I thought I was. I thought I was pretty good. And then I realized, nah, I can barely even talk. I don't even know how I have a podcast. So writing was completely off the table. This works out a lot better for me, but I am glad that there's still young people out there getting involved, because the magazines, when they started to die last year, I was heartbroken, because that was my foundation of my love of cars. Aside from my dad getting me into it, was just feeding it with car magazines, just feeding the addiction. So I'm happy that things are moving still towards a digital side of it, because when you're a magazine hoarder like I am, eventually you run out of room. So it's very cool that you're getting into writing. Let's get into Hemi Pages real quick. How is that? Because you guys launched Hemi Pages at the beginning of this year, or the first quarter. I think our first chat was April to midway through April, and you guys were just getting ready to launch. How has that gone so far?
It's good. Some of the challenges that we've run into is just getting people to cooperate and do things like claim their listings, which I really didn't think would be a problem. I think, offering the ability for people to get a free listing is making it almost too easy. So we're going to be coming out with a couple of packages to incent people to buy. But we're new, and our traffic is continuing to grow, but we're new. So it's just one of those things where we've never been heard of. We're continuing to grow traffic. We're continuing to do more interesting things. BuildMOPAR's certainly been a very helpful campaign piece that we've been able to launch. But it's good. It's fun. We're going to be doing a print version very soon. And I think getting out to some of the events will be pretty exciting. It's been challenging just because it's been such a busy year, and then everything with COVID, and Matt's in school, different lifestyle scenario, and we wanted to go racing, so there's a lot of competing factors. But I think it's going to continue to get better and better over time, and I think people will realize that what we're trying to do is something that's never been done before, and should be really helpful to the aftermarket.
Absolutely. First of all, the website's beautiful. HemiPages.com. I can't say that enough. Go check it out. And, you guys are still on the whole Hemi swap everything, and the whole Hemi, the third generation Hemi movement. Although the name Hemi has been around forever, I still think that this third generation Hemi movement is in its infancy. So anybody getting in on that ground floor, like Hemi Pages or, DIY Hemi or any of those guys, I think position perfect, because it's only going to blow up more than, there's only one way to go, and that's up. And while we're on the subject of Hemi Pages, I did want to promote listings. You have classifieds on Hemi Pages. What would it take for me, if I wanted to liquidate all my Mopars right now, what would it take for me to get my Mopars listed on Hemi Pages?
So our classifieds entry is currently free. At the end of the year, we're going to be charging, but you can get multiple photos, listings, and SEO optimization just by placing a classified, and we've got a lot of different categories for people to be able to list. So, we've done a reach out. We've had, oddly enough, a lot of people putting up Hemi cars. So I think they're not thinking maybe that we're all Mopar. So we've got to do a little bit better of a job sort of explaining that. But, they're available, and such as other things too, articles. We're willing to have writers get involved and get published, willing to work for people that want to donate content. So I'm kind of still waiting for some of that to pick up. We've done a lot of outreach, and everybody was really excited at first, and then it kind of became like maybe we were just like the rest, So we're continuing to try to find ways to differentiate and get the attention and noise of a lot of folks. But it is continuing to grow in traffic, and I think as the winter arrives and people get more into projects, and they've definitely got things to clear out, that we'll see an increase in that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I never really thought about it until right now, but maybe I'll submit some writing and see what you guys think about that. I'll have Matt check it out first, just to make sure, like, hey, Chris, maybe stick to the podcast, But I have a couple good ideas. We'll see. We'll roll the dice. But yeah, so anybody listening, HemiPages.com, go there, check it out. If anything, just go see what it's about. And if you're a business, you definitely want to be listed on Hemi Pages. It's prime real estate, if you ask me. Go to Hemi Pages right now and you'll see a Talking Mopars banner. That's there for a reason. not just because Chuck and Matt and myself are good friends, but there's, even if we weren't good friends, I wanted to, when I started this podcast, I was like, okay, I got to figure out some sort of advertising, for this thing, because I can't really expect people just to listen based off of Facebook. You know what I mean? So the power of advertising on websites is still there. And, especially with when you're talking about organizing the aftermarket and getting all these companies having a resource for people that want to build, like if I want to build, an engine similar to the Dart Pack's engine, I'll go to Hemi pages and I'll look at all these companies and I'll be able to read reviews and see what other enthusiasts have to say. And what Chuck was saying on one of our earlier interviews was, it levels the playing field, because on social media, when you start, if you go on social media and you say, hey, I want to build a 6.4 Hemi, what do you guys suggest? Where should I start? You're going to get a million different opinions, and we all know what they say about opinions. You know what I mean? Some of them are not very good. So definitely go check out HemiPages.com, and also Ready Chassis. I would keep my eyes on that one, because as soon as I think you guys are going to get that ball rolling next year sometime, or the year after, I'd imagine you're going to wait until the Dart Pack dust has kind of settled down.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've actually gotten a number of order requests.
Really?
Yeah, we've been shopping for a larger shop, which is interesting given all the other things that are going on. But we're ramping up to be able to build a car a month, and I think our target for that is going to be the January-February timeframe. So I'm hoping, as hopeful as I am to be able to get orders. We're still building one car already. It's an experimental car, and turning over actually a lot of parts that we've gathered over the years as well. So I've actually got a lot of engines, exhaust systems, just a lot of stuff that's got to go. So our used parts classifieds will be filled with that stuff as well.
Nice.
And you'll see the marketing when that comes out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. So the Dart Pack. We're going to assume that it's going to hit 8 seconds, maybe even knock on the door 7 seconds. It's going to have over 1,000 horsepower. And the best part is, for me at least, it's a Dart. I love darts. I'm an A-body guy. I don't know if that's just because that's all I can afford, or if I actually do love A-bodies. I think I do have a little bit of love for them. Modern Hemi. I mean, the list goes on of why the BuildMOPAR project is so cool and why you should participate. If you're listening to this, BuildMOPAR.com, HemiPages.com. Take it all in and definitely participate and vote today. Our vote right now is going for the engine builder. So how many choices are there? 4?
What's left?
Yeah, for the engine. Oh no, for this round of voting.
Oh, there's 6 different shops.
That's what I thought, 6.
And then there'll be 1, 2, 3, 5 more votes. We'll have the transmission vote, front suspension, rear suspension, tire setup, and then what we're leaving is the mystery vote for the very last. And we'll release that after all the other ones are done.
I'm excited about that one. And I don't even know the secrets, so I'm right there with all of you listeners. I can't wait to hear about it. It'll definitely be interesting to see, and I'm going to keep saying this, what direction this car takes. Because like I said earlier, I'm an old school guy. I would love to see it on some Kraggers. I guess we'll see how it all turns out. I'm really excited about it. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about while I got you on the horn on a Tuesday night?
No, just appreciate you giving us the time. I think the one thing I wanted to mention, why September 22nd was an important day, oddly enough. And this is an inside thing amongst, close friends, but I grew up with a friend, a guy named Ed Seawick, on the south side of Chicago, and we went racing some point 1992, I think it was, and we decided at that point that we would meet up every September 22nd at Great Lakes Dragway and go racing until we were too old to do so. And it's just always stayed in my mind. It also stayed in my mind because I was dating a girl at the time, and our anniversary was September 22nd. So, of course, our first anniversary, I was at the track and she wasn't there. So it'll go down as a day of infamy. But Ed Seawick's still out there. He's part of my Facebook social network. He's got a 70 Dart that's Hemi orange, and I know he keeps up with a lot of this stuff. So it's just it'd be a neat thing to be able to go and finally see that dream come true. I haven't seen the guy. Stood up at my wedding, but we haven't seen each other in probably 20 years.
Wow.
Just, life gets in the way kind of thing, and Facebook kind of keeps you in contact enough. So it was a special day for me. It's just funny. It's when we picked this day, I thought, well, what the heck, it was a day I promised myself many years ago that we would try to do it. In fact, I even told Matt that when we were at the track on the 18th that it was pretty close to that day. And it was, Chicago weather is always really nice at that time of the year, and sometimes it ends up on the weekends. And so, it's just a funny thing. He listens to the show. He'll probably hear that and chuckle to himself. But, it's the brotherhood, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
It started so many years ago and it continues today. So
Definitely.
It's a lot of fun.
How far out from Chicago are you guys?
So we're in Naperville. So we're about 40 miles west of the city.
Cool.
So we're about 30 minutes north of Route 66. We're about an hour and a half south of Great Lakes Dragway. We're about an hour and 20 minutes from Byron Dragway. So we're pretty well placed we've got a lot of choices.
Yeah, no kidding. Gosh, I'm jealous. You know what? It just hit me when you were talking about Chicago. I was thinking about it and I was like, I've never been to Chicago. I don't know what it's like today, but I think it would be kind of cool to get the BuildMOPAR, the Dart Pack, down to the corner of Grand and Spalding and do a photo shoot. Now, I don't know what that neighborhood looks like today, but have you ever been down by the old Mr. Norm's?
Yeah, I have. Actually, I don't think that would be unrealistic.
Yeah,
I think that if we did it on a Sunday morning and cooler weather, we'd have we'd have no problems at all. And I think the dealership structure and everything else is there. So
God,
that's
cool.
a really cool idea. I'm going to take that one down.
That is a very cool idea. Good job, Chris.
Yeah.
Pat on the back.
No, awesome idea.
It just hit me because that's one place, that obviously has a very rich history with Mopars. And it really is heartbreaking when I've seen some of the current or more current pictures of the place. And it kind of breaks my heart that it's not still a Chrysler dealership, because that would just be, epic if Grand Spalding Dodge still existed.
Yeah.
But it definitely would be cool to get a photo shoot of that car at the high performance HQ of Mr. Norm. That would be very cool.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Matt, before we take off here for the night, I want to make sure you let everybody know where they can see your riding.
Yeah, absolutely. So I write for two magazines. If you want to check out the stuff that I do that's more drag racing related, you can check out streetmusclemag.com. And if you're more into looking at some stuff that's just classic restorations, you can go to rodauthority.com.
Awesome. How much work do you have over there so far?
So far, I have 2 articles written for Street Muscle Mag, and I'm about to have my second article posted for Rod Authority.
Nice, putting in that work. Man, my hat's off to you. I don't know how you do it all. You got college, you got your writing gigs, you got your crazy dad with all these crazy ideas. But yeah, man, I think you're on the right path, and best of luck to you. Obviously, you're my friend, so we're going to keep in touch, and everything that I write, you're going to proofread. So
sounds good.
Got your back.
Chuck, anything
Thank you.
like to get off your chest before we ride off into the sunset?
No, just Mopar or no car, and appreciate you giving us the time, and look forward to continuing to see the votes. And as we head into the election season, we'll also be ending BuildMOPAR, so it'll be fun to see how it ends up.
Absolutely. Once again, hemipages.com, ReadyChassis.shop. And if you want to check out the BuildMOPAR project, you can find it on Hemi Pages, but you can also go to BuildMOPAR.com. How easy is that? Get your votes in. Let's get thousands, let's get millions of people to vote for this thing. The Dart Pack. How cool is that? I think it's a great name. Modern Hemi, 68 Dart, super stock tribute car, modern Hemi. Doesn't get any better than that. Folks, get your votes in today. That's it for Talking Mopar's Direct Connections with Chuck and Matt McMurray. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Chris. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of Direct Connections, this time with Chuck and Matt McMurray. These are my favorite episodes of the podcast, and there are plenty more to come with some familiar voices and some new ones too. Who knows? There may even be a video version of this show in the works, so stay tuned. There you have it, my friends. Another episode of Talking Mopars is in the books. For more information about this podcast or to listen and subscribe to the show, please visit TalkingMopars.com. And don't forget that you can send me your stories, questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, and everything else on your Mopar addicted mind to Chris at TalkingMopars.com, or leave me a voice message on my voicemail box at 209-28-MOPAR to hear yourself on the show. And don't forget to check out HemiPages.com, ReadyChassis.shop, and of course, BuildMOPAR.com. One last thing before we go, if you'd like to help support the show, jump on over to TalkingMopars.com, head on over to the store and click Visit the Shop. There you're going to find all the current Talking Mopars merch like t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, stickers, and more. So not only are you going to get some cool stuff, but if you like the show, you're going to help me keep it running. That's it, my friends. Until we talk again, I am your host, Chris Albrecht, and that was Talking Mopars, Direct Connections.
Thank you for listening to Talking Mopars, your direct connection to all things Mopar. Until next time, remember, no Mopar left behind.